Now the George Fisher Signet 2552 metal magmeter can be installed into the pipe. Now the magmeter has a red boot that's on the front of the sensors to protect the sensors from damage. The sensors are the two metal pieces in the front. Once the red boot is taken off, this portion must be retracted into the housing in order to put it on top of the ball valve without damaging the electrodes. So simply turn the hub and you'll see the sensors retracting back into the metal housing. Once the sensor is fully retracted into the housing, Teflon tape can be used to wrap process threads for sealing. Now the assembly is ready to put into the ball valve. As I hold on to the sensor housing, the threaded housing, I can turn the process threads, and taking a wrench, I can tighten the threads into the ball valve. The next step in the installation process is to move this housing piece so that you can see the flow arrow. The flow arrow is directly on the bottom of the housing. This will be pointed in the direction of the downstream direction. Once that's done, get the brass rod, find the hole at the top of the sensor, and insert the brass rod in. Once this is parallel to the pipe, the electrodes will be perpendicular to the flow, so the flow is flowing between the two electrodes. Next, find the Allen wrench. The Allen wrench will help lock the housing into the process thread nut. Now, the assembly won't move. The next step, now that the sensor is completely installed into the ball valve, is to open the valve. If you have a sensor that has a connector on top, you want to make sure that you connect the cable before you insert the sensor into the pipe. Now we start turning the hub to start inserting the sensor into the pipe. Once the sensor is inserted so far, you want to start thinking about how to properly seat it into the pipe. The proper seating into the pipe is approximately 10% of the inner diameter. To make this calculation, you calculate the H dimension, taking the sensor height, which is given, the wall thickness, and then 10% of the ID. You subtract those two numbers to obtain your H dimension. In this case, which is a 4-inch pipe, the H dimension will be 10.24 inches or 260 millimeters. So taking the ruler that's provided with the sensor, I find 10.25 inches, and I measure from the bottom of the brass rod to the top of the pipe. As you can see, we need to insert the sensor further down. So now the sensor is 10.25 inches between the top of the pipe and the bottom of the brass rod. Now the sensor is properly installed at 10% of the inner diameter into the pipe. The next step would be to go back to the blue pouch that was provided with the sensor and pull out the clamps. The clamps will lock the hub into place. One would go on the top and the bottom, and now the sensor is securely into the pipe. The last step is to collect your accessories and put it back on the chain provided, and simply hang it on the sensor so that the next time the sensor needs to be retracted from the system, you can have all of the tools very handy. Remove the tools from the sensor and remove the pipe clamp. and begin to retract the sensor out of the process pipe. Once the hub stops, you know that the sensor is fully retracted out of the process, and now the ball valve can be closed off without damaging the electrodes. To remove the sensor, simply unthread the process threads from the ball valve. And the sensor can be cleaned if needed.